welcome Mr. Wlaschin to the podium.
All right. Good afternoon. I'm happy that Mark and Mike and others at least put a yarn clog between me and lunch. I know the French like to eat late, so that should be all right. But I'm going to be fairly brief with my presentation. Before I put up the first slide, I know Jim and others have commented a little bit about the fact that some rules should be coming out. Well, my presentation is more about MAP-21 and what those rules are. And for most of us, we don't realize, and I probably made the same comment last year, there are 9 or 10 of these federal rules. Congress passes legislation, and in the legislation it says, the Secretary of Transportation shall promulgate rules to enforce what I put in the statute or what Congress put in the statute. So in the process they've done that. There are about 9 and or possibly 10 rules. Within those rules, there are 3 of them that specifically have to do with performance of our nation's highway system. Within those 3 rules, there are 12 different sets of measures that state DOTs will now be required to monitor and report on. And all that part of the details of those rules will be coming out in those rules. The first of the 3 of the 9 rules, the first 3 of them, quite possibly could be published in the Federal Register this Friday. And we're waiting for final clearance from OMB, but if those 3 rules come out, there will be a rule coming out on changes to the Highway Safety Improvement Program that state DOTs are involved with. There will be rules on performance-based planning and how to integrate all the planning requirements. And there will be one on safety performance measures. One specifically on safety performance measures is moving beyond just how many fatalities and what are we doing about fatalities. There will be other ones about serious injuries and how many pedestrians, like here in Florida, what are those statistics and what are we doing and how are we addressing those? Each of those 3 rules will then have a 90-day public comment period. States, interested parties, your neighbor, could all send in comments to the docket, and then various parts of federal highway will have to address those comments and then issue final rules. So that's a little bit about the overall plan. And let me, what I'm going to talk about is in particular 2 other of those measures. One of them is the asset management rule and how it affects state DOTs, and the other one is the infrastructure performance rule. And that one comes down to pavements and bridges, and obviously I'm just going to talk a little bit about the pavement side of it. The asset management rule. State DOTs are being required by the law to document. And the key word to me is document the process. Whatever they do, whatever Tom does in Florida, whatever Carlos does in Utah, whatever the other people do in the various states, when they say, oh yeah, we're taking care of our pavement and bridges, there has to be a document and a process that they go through, and that process has to be certified, and then we get to take a look at the document and look to see how those measures are maintaining the system. A draft rule was written by my staff and with a lot of public comment. We reached out to various subcommittees. Assad heads up the subcommittee on asset management. He also heads up the one on performance management. And we've dealt with him and AASHTO and a variety of people trying to figure it out what should be in that process. The state needs to identify a strategic vision of where they want to have their pavements and bridges. They need to figure out what's a good condition and inventory. And people say, oh, we got that covered. Well, let me just tell you that in the last month, going through the 2012 data that I get on an annual basis from the state DOTs, I have recently discovered that more than 2,000 miles of the interstate is unpaved. I'm still looking for that because I just saw a slide earlier that says the interstate's complete. Well, evidently there's 2,000 miles of it that's still gravel, and we're working on it. But that's news to me, and when I brought it up to the chief engineers, it's news to them. Because the data they report isn't often used by the It's just a requirement by federal highway saying report on the data. You need to be able to look at that inventory, do a condition assessment. You need to look at gaps. What is my desired level of service for that particular interstate or roadway, and where are we today? That's a gap. And then you could try to get more money to close the gap, but maybe you might suggest that maybe we set the bar too high. Maybe the bar, does 99% of the interstate have to be in perfect condition? We don't have time and money to do that. That's a brand new roadway. We're currently in the process of rebuilding the roadways, so we know that that's 99% is in good condition. The draft rule, as I said, has been completed. It's under legal review. We like to say that. It's in the mail or it's under legal review. But the process is in legal review. We're hoping that the asset management rule will be published in the late April timeframe. There's a national asset management conference being held in Miami the last week of April. I'm doing my darndest to try to make sure that that rule is published in or around that time so we can have a very public discussion about what's going on in that rule. There will be a 60, maybe a 90-day comment period, and our goal is to have the final rule in place by September 30th of this year. That will give the states about a year to submit their processes and their rule. And already I have about 8 or 10 states that want to submit their draft proposals to me and to the state division offices, May, June, July of this year. So they're getting closer. I think there's a sense of urgency about it, because if you don't have a certified process and you don't have an asset management plan, you're going to lose 35% of your federal funds. And that's a big ticket. Let's not have that happen. We do want to get it passed. When it comes to the infrastructure rule, a little bit different. It's a performance rule that my goal is to, and my charge is to come up with an acceptable means of measuring the condition of the pavement on the interstate highway. And you heard me talk about this last year. There are a lot of people who say, well, we do IRI. Well, IRI is telling me some really funny things when I look at the 2012 data. We have about 1,100 miles that have IRIs greater than 1,700. I didn't even know the machines could measure things over 400 or 500. So 1,700 is quite a stretch of the imagination. But there are just countless sections that do that. There are a lot of sections that just say IRI is greater than 400. If you're not driving in a Humvee or maybe some off-road vehicle, you would not drive on a road that probably has IRIs greater than 300 or 400. So for data to be sent to me that way, that's sort of strange. In recent times, I met with almost 30 different state DOTs, and I said, hey, I'm looking at your IRI data. It hasn't changed in the last 10 years. And they said, well, we don't collect IRI. I said, oh, but the rule says you will submit IRI data to federal highway every other year on all of your interstate sample sections, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they said, well, we don't collect IRI. We do a lot of other things. And then we have these formulas and algorithms, and we say, well, if all these things are true, then the IRI must be around 75. And they've been submitting that data. The long and short of it is state DOTs probably didn't realize that part of the funding formulas for giving money back to the state was based on those IRI numbers. So wouldn't you want those IRI numbers to be a little bit more, ground truth and representative of what's going on out there? Some states only collect data in one direction, east-west, north and south. They don't collect it in both directions. Some states collect it for the first half of a mile and say the next 11 miles are exactly the same. Try that in a math equation. That works pretty good. That average is a whole lot different than if you did it foot by foot or every 10 feet all the way out to that 11 miles. So there's significant inconsistencies. I attended a meeting in Atlanta last summer. I had chief engineers tell me, what do you want the numbers to look like? We can drive a little bit to the left, and our numbers will be different than those that are on the right. We can turn the machine on and off, and we can do lots of different things. We don't use the data. What are you using the data for? So we need to be a little bit clearer on that. And so in our draft rules, we've been looking at how can we make the data more consistent? How can we find data that you're already using on a day-to-day basis and use that to tell Congress what's the condition of the nation's highways? Not me coming up with some imaginary number saying, well, in my Humvee, this is the number that I get, and it's all pretty good. Or do I need to have the motor freight companies tell me that the roads do bear for? So we've looked at those, we've looked at lots of different things. The other piece of the measurement is that we were to establish by rule a minimum condition for the interstate highway systems. What's the absolute minimum that we would find acceptable, or would Congress have to then tell a DOT, spend more money on this road and get it so that it's no longer in a minimum condition? And you'd think that'd be fairly easy. Well, not with 50 highway departments. There's a reason there are 50 highway departments. There's probably a reason there are 33,000 different owners of the highway system in general. There's different geographic areas, different traffic demands, different materials, different lots of stuff out there. But for us to come in and say, there ought to be one number, you should never go below that number. And so we've been struggling with that, and you'll find something in our notice of proposed rule that says this is what we envision being the minimum number, the minimum amount of the interstate that should be in poor condition. And then we've taken some time to define what is poor. That means that it no longer should be doing preservation. It means tear up the road, start all over, reconstruct the road. That's sort of the general description. That MPRM, in legal review, but we think that we're very close. We're hoping that it comes out in the late April, early May timeframe, right around the same time as the asset management rule. There will be, I don't know why it says a 960-day comment period, but I really think it's just a 90-day comment period for that rule. And again, that rule, because we think it might be highly controversial, probably we won't get the final rule until the spring of 2015. So a little bit further out. Asset management rule probably by September this year. The final pavement infrastructure rule probably in the spring of 2015. Last couple of comments. We need to establish a method to do that, as that's what I already said. Minimum standards for the interstate, we're doing that. Federal government, probably since the late 70s, as a planning tool, has been collecting something called highway performance monitoring system data. We ask the states fill in these 69 categories of data, submit them to us every year. We just recently completed a nationwide survey. There are 69 elements. Only one state even knew what 68 of 69 were. The minimum, one state said, well, we routinely use 14 of them. We don't know what to do with the others. So we need to get our act together. We shouldn't be asking for data that you don't know what we're doing with it, and why are we asking for that data? So we're working on that. But the bottom line is, Congress is going to hold us accountable. We're going to hold the state accountable. The database is the HPMS database. So we want to make sure the data that's in there is as good as we can possibly get it. And I think it's there. It's just that people that collect the data probably don't appreciate the people that are collecting the data. They just report it, and now we need to get everybody in the same room. Good, fair, and poor, we're going to find that. I think the pavement management system will include IRI, running, cracking, faulty. If I went to your state DOTs, they're going to say they do that exactly. They do IRI, they do faulty, they do running. You saw Tom put it up on his slide. Florida is certainly one of those that does collect that. But there are states probably going to struggle with that a little bit. I'm suggesting that rather than use a single value, that it might be 3 of those values, or 4 of those values, but I want to use data that the state is already collecting. To try to get some uniformity in it, we're going to suggest that you collect it maybe on the interstate in both directions, but maybe for the rest of the NHS, how about just every other year? I might ask for the interstate annually, both directions, 1 lane, but maybe as a compromise on the NHS, how about every other year? Maybe that would solve some of the angst that people are coming up with. Equipment, people have said inconsistency in the equipment, inconsistency in the people, inconsistency in the software, inconsistency. Why are you collecting this data when it's so inconsistent? We're looking at these answers. I don't have answers for them, but skid testing, they have calibration centers. FWD have done calibration centers. Maybe that will happen, maybe by 2015, 16, 17. We'll take a look at that. I put down third generation. One of my concerns is, just as we saw in Jim and Butch's comments, what happens when we do these preservation treatments on top of an existing pavement? In Iowa, in one section of the highway, there were 19 different composite sections. And we basically base all the numbers on what's on top. Is it black or is it white? And that's the answer. But really, there's a lot of stuff going on underneath it. We looked at a section in North Carolina, many composite sections, concrete, asphalt. You know, to make it look good, they covered it all with microsurfacing. Microsurfacing on top of ASR concrete does not work well. And it comes apart rapidly if you do that. So the fact that it was all shiny black was not a good measure of the overall condition of that pavement. So where are we going, and how can we come up with a better tool? You know, how can we interact with the state DOTs and really come up with a tool that says, this is the condition of our pavements. Preservation certainly required, as you heard, part of the asset management plan. And as you heard from Jim, I'm trying really hard to reconvene the pavement preservation ETG and try to get everybody back in the room. What do we need to do? What's our role, responsibility? What's our research needs? What's the facts out there? Not anecdotal stuff, but how good does chip seal work? How good and effective is microsurfacing? Does it solve a moisture problem, just as we saw in one of the slides? What do we know, and how can we add to that process? Again, in the preservation area, we're looking at guide specs. I've asked ISSA, I've asked AEMA. I reached out to even MAP one day and said, hey, you know, we're putting down these products and we don't really know, do we have the best materials? Is this a good application for your product? If we put it down and it comes apart tomorrow, you will be banned from working in that state for the next 5 or 10 years. We don't want to do that. So that means we have to have the right people, the right place, the right time, the right application. Let's get it right. Let's have some better data than we have today. Quality control, quality assurance. There is some discussion about vendor certification. We got a ways to go to work on that. I'm trying to be done. But comments and questions, I'll be here the rest of the day and all day tomorrow. So, you know, rather than interfere with lunch, I don't mind if you disturb my lunch.